The gun grabbers are targeting our nation's heroes. Soldiers who fought for our rights overseas only to come home and be stripped of their own constitutional rights back home by rabid, woke Biden bureaucrats. Hi, Ryan Flugaur here, Vice President for the National Association for Gun Rights. Today we're going to talk about the veterans' gun ban, one of the most shameful gun controls ever imposed in America by the left. But a quick update before we get started. Late last week, just before we were about to film this video on the veterans' gun ban, we got word that our partners at Wisconsin Institute for Liberty and Law, WIL, just secured a huge win and a national injunction against Joe Biden's pistol brace ban in the case of Brito v. ATF. Congratulations to Will and Darren Brito and his co-plaintiff, who are decorated Marine combat veterans, for this major win. Will is also the same law firm which secured a similar injunction protecting members of the National Association for Gun Rights. But finally, a court had the guts to strike down the pistol brace ban nationally, at least for now. So hit that subscribe button so we can keep you up to date on all of those cases as they progress through the appeals process. And also check out the link in the description and pinned comment where we're giving away a 2023 Toyota Tacoma TRD Pro as our 2A technical giveaway. The other good news this Veterans Day is Congress might be about to take a major step towards ending the veterans gun ban once and for all. Or they might ruin it all. So I'm going to break this video into 3 parts. First, what is the veterans gun ban? Second, how does the veterans gun ban affect all of our Second Amendment rights, not just veterans? And finally, what is Congress doing right now about this issue and how can you help? Part 1, what is the veterans gun ban? We're going to put a link in the description of this video to our one-pager detailing more background, but essentially it is this, an unconstitutional ban that is in place right now, which targets to date over 250,000 Department of Veterans Affairs beneficiaries. Our organization and other gun rights groups have been fighting against this for decades, and that's because it dates back to the administration of then-President Bill Clinton, almost to the founding of the unconstitutional NICS background check system to begin with. But unlike the Brady Bill and the NICS system, which were sadly passed into law by an act of Congress, the veterans gun ban was not. Instead, it was promulgated by federal rulemaking bureaucrats who take statute and twist it to mean whatever they think they can get away with. So the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs struck an agreement in 1998 with the FBI to begin forwarding the names of VA beneficiaries they accuse of being mentally incompetent because of their alleged inability to contract or manage their own affairs. This determination is made against a veteran based on the appointment of a fiduciary or a designated payee to assist in managing certain oftentimes complicated financial affairs, and usually the person's a family member. These records are maintained on the FBI's National Instant Criminal Background Check (NICS) system and are used to deny gun sales when background checks are conducted. Understand this. We're not talking about veterans who have been adjudicated mentally defective in a court of law. There is no court hearing. The Clinton administration arbitrarily decided that the mere action of appointing a fiduciary to manage a VA beneficiary's finance, in other words, to cash their checks, is categorically in and of itself the determination. And that person is adjudicated mental defective for purposes of stripping their gun rights under the Gun Control Act of 1968. Therefore, they could automatically and without objection forward all of those names over to the NICS system to deny veterans the right to buy a gun when going through the background check system. No court, no trial, no right to an attorney, no evidence of a crime, no evidence of being a danger to yourself or others, no right to a defense. In fact, the Code of Federal Regulations and the NICS Improvement Act of 2007, which was signed into law by President Bush in the wake of the Virginia Tech shooting, use the verbiage board, commission, or other lawful authority as entities that can adjudicate away your gun rights. Guys, that's not how due process is supposed to work, especially when it comes to a fundamental right like the Second Amendment. But once the VA makes that decision against a veteran and appoints a fiduciary, then typically the only notice that a veteran is given is a letter that they're sent that they're being stripped of their Second Amendment rights in the mail. There's a paragraph buried in it in the fine print saying that they're banned from owning or possessing or buying guns. Let me read from the fine print of one such letter which has surfaced over the years. Quote, A determination of incompetency will prohibit you from purchasing, possessing, receiving, transporting a firearm or ammunition. If you knowingly violate any of these prohibitions, you may be fined, imprisoned, or both pursuant to the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act. As it turns out, buried in the rulemaking, actual evidence of a mental health issue isn't even what triggers the ban. But this letter goes on to say that you may appeal the decision, not to a court of law. You may appeal it straight back to, you guessed it, the VA only. And if they say no, your gun rights are toast. Oh, and the time window to execute this appeal is extremely narrow, so if you're a veteran and you miss it, you'll likely be on the NICS no-gun list for the rest of your life. In 2015, a Freedom of Information request by a group called Judicial Watch showed that out of nearly 200,000 veterans who were affected by this, only 4,000 were able to actually file the appeal. And of those, only 228 were ever acted on. And most of those were actions that upheld the denial. So only 70 people, presumably, were granted the relief. So that means if you're affected by the veterans gun ban, you have a 0.04% chance of getting your right to keep and bear arms restored. And if you're caught with a gun, like a hunting rifle that you want to hand down to your grandchild, you could be arrested and hauled to jail. The veterans gun ban is about arresting and jailing our nation's veterans. Fast forward about 10 or 15 years, when scores of troops are returning from war in Iraq and Afghanistan, many with PTSD. That's when the numbers affected by the veterans gun ban started to radically increase. Let me give you a point of reference. In 2001, it only affected 20 veterans. By 2011, 22,000 veterans were being added to the list every single year under President Obama. And as of January 3rd, 2023, the number of veterans banned from owning guns stood at a whopping 261,168, according to the FBI's NICS indexes. The rate of increase has declined in the most recent years, but the core of this public policy and the trail of veterans impacted by it remain intact today. Now for part 2. How does the veterans gun ban threaten everyone's Second Amendment rights? You look at this policy and say it's stupid and should be repealed, but the left looks at this policy and says it's brilliant and it should be expanded everywhere. Under President Obama, they tried this. The Obama administration tried to replicate the veterans gun ban policy through the federal rulemaking process through every agency they could. And they started by going after 4.2 million Social Security beneficiaries. They finalized the rule and it was all set to take effect, but then Republicans won the 2016 election and Congress used their power of executive oversight to pass a bill rescinding Obama's Social Security gun ban. But that does not mean that Joe Biden or the next president or Chuck Schumer in the Senate aren't going to try again. President Obama and Biden's unified agenda for expanding the VA gun ban across every department was just the beginning. Imagine if they someday decide that you're mentally defective and need to give up your gun rights if you owe back taxes to the IRS. Imagine if the CDC or HHS decides that you're mentally defective and need to lose your gun rights because you refuse to take a COVID vaccine. Maybe the Department of Education will decide that you're mentally defective for homeschooling your children. It's not hard to see how the precedent of the veterans gun ban could be rolled out to virtually every American these days. To be honest, this is kind of where Republicans have let us down. You see, they only repealed the Social Security gun ban when they had power. When it came to the veterans gun ban, it sure made for many pro-gun, pro-veteran, and pro-American sounding floor speeches on the floor of the House and the Senate, like, some from Senator Chuck Grassley and others. But it didn't really end the veterans gun ban or get to the root of the problem, which is the concept that a constitutional right can be stripped somehow by a board, commission, or other lawful authority. And this is defined in 27 CFR 478.11, Code of Federal Regulations. So that's why in 2016, your National Association for Gun Rights worked with Senator Rand Paul on drafting and introducing the Protect Gun Rights and Due Process Act, which would have ended the root cause for the veterans gun ban for good. So that it not only ends this assault on our nation's heroes, but it ensures that it can never grow legs and be replicated anywhere else again. Currently, pro-gun Congressman Scott Perry of Pennsylvania is running this bill right now, and it's H.R. 1258. Simply says that you can't take away someone's guns without actual adjudication in an actual court of law, not this board, commission, or other lawful authority nonsense. And that bill actually goes further by requiring the VA to audit and remove all veterans who are placed on the NICS no-gun list without due process. Sadly, this bill wasn't passed when Republicans had the chance to do it back in 2017, which means the door is cracked wide open for a more massive power abuses by Joe Biden and the anti-gun Democrats to try this out elsewhere. So that brings me to part 3 of this video. What Congress is doing right now and how can you help? The good news is Congress is suddenly doing something on this issue, and it's actually quite shocking to see that something good is happening for once, but this is by no means a slam dunk and it doesn't go quite far enough. As you may have seen and heard, Congress is in the middle right now of trying to pass budget bills. And one of the bills that they're working on is the one that funds the VA. It's H.R. 4366. In that bill, an amendment run by pro-gun U.S. Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana passed with 4 vulnerable Democrats crossing over and voting for it, which partially addresses the veterans gun ban by defunding it. Paraphrased, that amendment says, quote, none of the funds made available by this act may be used to report a person who is deemed mentally incompetent as mental defective under subsection D4 or G4 of the Gun Control Act, without the order of finding by a judge, magistrate, or other judicial authority of competent jurisdiction that such person is a danger to himself or herself or others. This is a step in the right direction. And this Veterans Day, I'm asking you to pick up the phone and call your senators at 202-224-3121 and ask them to insist that they protect veterans' gun rights and the gun rights of all Americans by keeping Senate Amendment 1354 in H.R. 4366. Folks, this isn't a perfect fix, but it's a start. Before Chuck Schumer allowed the vote, he insisted on weakening Kennedy's much stronger initial draft. Speaking as someone who's followed the Senate for 15 years now, my gut tells me that Schumer intentionally allowed the vote so those 4 vulnerable Senate Democrats can go home to their red and purple states with a pro-gun talking point in 2024, all while intending to strip it in the conference committee before it actually gets to Biden's desk anyway. I know that's a lot of inside baseball, but we cannot let that happen. So call your lawmakers, 202-224-3121. And while you're at it, you can also tell them to co-sponsor H.R. 1258, which is really what we need to remove the names of veterans who have already lost their gun rights without due process from the NICS index. It's 250,000 of them. Of course, no one wants a crazy person to have a gun, but this isn't about that. It's about due process rights for veterans and all Americans. It's about ensuring that for those who truly might need help, that they can get that help without the fear that they're going to lose their freedoms and go to jail. And it's about rectifying a 25-year-long stain on freedom perpetrated on our nation's heroes by politicians and bureaucrats. Following the horrific shooting in Maine last month, there are outcries by rabid gun grabbers right now to strip this pro-gun, pro-veterans amendment from the Bill and Conference Committee. They want to keep the veterans gun ban as some sort of crude experiment so they can once again roll it out on all Americans. If we don't end the veterans gun ban now, mark my words, it will only be a matter of time before President Biden or the next anti-gun president issues another rule declaring large groups of Americans crazy and stripping us of our gun rights. We must not let them do that. So please, take action now. 202-224-3121. Call them and ask your elected officials to end the veterans gun ban once and for all. Tell them to keep Senate Amendment 1354 in H.R. 4366 and to co-sponsor H.R. 1258 today. Thank you, especially to all who have served, and God bless.